Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. And today we're going to talk about how it is that you can move from a visa to a green card. And we're going to go through a number of different visa options to give you some ideas. Just a few housekeeping things. This will be recorded, so we will post this as a video webinar onto our YouTube channel. We do encourage you to sign up to our YouTube channel if you and to subscribe to it if you have not already. And also, we will be sending out a number of things after the presentation. We'll be sending out the actual recording. We'll be sending out the PowerPoint presentation that's in front of you, and we'll also be sending out some guides to the various different visas that we're going to talk about today. And if you do have any questions throughout the process, please feel free to add them to the Q&A or the chat function. We will get to all questions. So without further ado, let us move to the presentation. So first, just a little bit about the green card system in the United States and how that actually works. So it's very different from other countries where there's a points-based system. In the United States, there is just a system where there are a list of green card categories, and if you're eligible for the categories, you can apply. And that is very different from countries, for example, like Canada, where you might get points for speaking the language, for education, for age, different things like that. And once you get enough points, you become permanent residents. But here it is very different. And generally speaking, the categories are broken up into family-based green cards and employment-based green cards. And we will spend, the time going through each of those. So first, let's start with family-based green cards. So broken up into two categories, one being immediate relative category and the other being a preference-based category. Now, the immediate relative category is defined by statute, so it's not the way we'd normally think of immediate relatives. So a preference-based category would be, for example, a brother or sister sponsoring, a U.S. citizen brother or sister sponsoring their sibling. And we would always, of course, think of that as an immediate relative. But here, immediate relative is a U.S. citizen over 21, or if you're sponsoring a spouse, a U.S. citizen sponsoring their spouse. And the good thing about the immediate relative category is that category is always current, so there's no visa backlog in that particular category. So that's something to, something to keep in mind in terms of availability. The preference-based categories are broken out into five further subcategories. And the issue with those, so one example is U.S. citizen that wants to sponsor their sibling, or green card holder that wants to sponsor their spouse. But the issue with those is that there are backlogs associated with them. In fact, I believe right now, all of them are backlogged, and some of them can be quite significant. So for example, the example that I use for U.S. citizen sponsoring their sibling, that is backlogged by 14 to 15 years. So it is quite a while that you would have to wait before the green card category was actually available. Now this part of the presentation, it's really the same for all categories. There's either a two-step process or a three-step process from moving from a visa to an immigrant visa or a green card. And so let's say that, for example, someone's on a TN visa or an E2 visa, and they meet a U.S. citizen and they want to marry them, and it's under the immediate relative category. There's going to be a step 1, 2, and possibly 3. So so depending on the facts and circumstances. But step 1 is always going to be filing the objective petition. So that's going to be, in this case, it's going to be I-130. In the employment-based categories, it could be I-140 or I-526. We'll get to those. But then the second is going to be either doing what's called an adjustment of status or doing what's called consular processing. So if you're in the United States, you can be eligible to do adjustment of status. And the benefit of that is that you can also apply for employment authorization and travel authorization such that you can stay in the United States while the petition is pending. So for the family-based petition, it's always going to be I-130 that's filed. And then depending on whether the visa category is current, so like as I said, in immediate relative categories, that's always current. But if you were filing, for example, your brother or sister, if there's a U.S. citizen that was filing for their brother or sister, for example, they would have to wait till that's current to be able to file the I-485. And as I said, that's how it works for all the categories. There's always this kind of objective component, and then the I-485 or consular processing. Now, I said that there sometimes can be three components. Now, the third component is if the green card category is one where you're issued a conditional green card. So under the immediate relative category, if you are sponsoring your spouse, you do have to file another petition 2 years after getting the green card to show that you are, that marriage is still bona fide and that you are still married, et cetera. So there can be three parts to it. So now let's move to the employment-based category. So the employment-based categories are broken out in terms of EB1 through EB5. So, we're not going to talk about EB4. It's a religious-based category, and our firm doesn't do any of those. But these, EB1 through EB5, they're, someone could, as I said, they could be on a TN, they could be on an E2. Now, but what often happens is that there is kind of a similar non-immigrant category related to each of these. So, for example, EB1A, a lot of people that want to get a green card under EB1A may have an O1 visa before, because the criteria for an O1, it's a non-immigrant visa. They're very similar to EB1A. So what this particular category does is it lists the criteria are listed out on your screen. And what this does is it says, okay, if you meet 3 of these, then you may be eligible for. So we want to eligible for this green card, and we want to meet way more than 3, because the more you meet, the more successful your case might be, but at least 3 to be able to apply. So, for example, that you judge the work of others. They figure that if this is trying to show that you've risen to the top of your field, and if you are judging the work of other people in that field, then they think they see that as a criteria to show that you actually have risen to the top of your field. Now, and one thing is that we're not going to spend a lot of time going through these different categories, because we do have separate webinars on each of these topics, and each of these we could speak about them for an hour. But we do encourage you to sign up for those separate webinars and attend them to get full detail, and or download the free guide that we have related to each of these topics. The other great thing about EB1A is that you are able to self-petition. So that's really good, and what that means is you don't need an employer. So that's great. And as I said, for these, it's either going to be a 2-step process or 3-step process. In this case, it's going to be a 2-step process where you file the I-140, which is showing that you have met at least 3 of the criteria above. And then if you're in the United States, you're going to be doing adjustment of status, and if you're out of the United States, then you're going to be doing consular processing. So the EB2 national interest waiver, we move a lot of people from visas to green cards in multiple categories. So it can be in TN, it can be in H-1B, it can be E2, and really a number of different categories, because this particular category tends to lend itself to a certain amount of strategy and flexibility with respect to it. And what this one is looking at, it's looking at whether or not what the person's coming to the United States to do is in the national importance. It either has substantial merit and is nationally important. And that could be that what they're coming to do is create jobs. It could be that there's other economic benefit. And a lot of the time, we are pointing that out. So we've done these petitions for cybersecurity experts. We've done people who are advancing things with respect to global warming or promoting a green environment. So lots of different kind of different types of things that you can point to that are in the national interest. The second prong with respect to this is that you have to be well positioned to advance the endeavor. So if you're an entrepreneur, because we do a lot of E2s, and if you're an entrepreneur, then you want to show that you have contracts in place, that you're well capitalized. Maybe you've been accepted to an incubator. Maybe you have substantial investment that has been made already. And all of those things are going to show that you're well positioned. And then the third criteria is really showing that you're basically saying that the government should waive this because and pointing to factors, sometimes in prong 1 and prong 2, but also pointing to factors to show that maybe you have publications, and maybe some of even the same factors we talked about in the EB1 context. And just one thing with this, it does fall under the EB2 criteria, EB2 realm. So you do have to meet the basic EB2 criteria of having an advanced degree, which are defined on the bottom of this slide. So the next area that we see people moving, and this is something where someone comes to the United States, they might be on an H-1B, they might be on a TN, and then the company decides to sponsor for them a green card, and and that is done under the EB2 or EB3 category. So that's where you have to prove to the U.S. government, the Department of Labor, that you can't find a qualified U.S. person. So there's a whole process related to what's called the PERM, where you have to file for a prevailing wage and post the job and really show that you can't find a qualified U.S. person. And then you're going to file the I-140 again, and the I-485 or consular processing. So and as I said, those second steps are really the same regardless of which category you're in. And now we come to the last one of EB5, and EB5 is really a green card through investment, right? So you are investing either 800,000 or $1,050,000 and creating 10 full-time jobs. Now, this is going to be done either through what's called a regional center, where it's going to be a more passive form of investment, or it's going to be done where you are actually starting your own company and you are investing in that company and creating the 10 full-time jobs, because those are really the two key components of this. And we do a lot of these for people who are on E2 visas, so they've already invested some money, and maybe they can top up that because the investment doesn't have to be made at the same time. But and there are a lot of differences between E2. The source of funds is different. E2 requires that you're national of a treaty country. EB5 does not. But definitely we've done a lot of EB5s moving people to a green card. The one big issue with EB5s is they take a really long time to be adjudicated. So 4 to 5 years just for the I-526. And the I-526 is that first step. And now the one great thing is that, so similar to the I-130 or the I-140, one great thing about the I-526 though, and the I-485 is now, starting March of 2022, you are actually able to file the I-485 concurrently with the I-526 as long as the category is current. So that's something that is very, 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 very helpful. And we don't do a lot of these, but we sometimes have one or at least one person a year that wins the diversity lottery. So, that's something you have to look out for in October and sign up, and then they do the lottery in May. So that's another way to get a green card. And then you also have to kind of take a look at, sometimes we don't do a lot of these, but sometimes people can get green cards through a humanitarian basis. So there's a Violence Against Women's Act. There's for spousal abuse and things like that. That might, but sometimes if people assist the police with a crime, they can get a green card. So different ways of getting that as well. And then the one thing you always have to keep in mind is kind of the timing considerations with green cards, because some green cards, especially like EB5, they take a significant amount of time to actually be granted. So you do have to make sure that you are maintaining your underlying status, and then what we do have is, in a lot of cases, we do have individuals who are able to have multiple green card strategies at the same time. So they might be able to have a strategy where they're able to apply for a national interest waiver, but also apply for EB5. And as I said, for this, I know I went through them quickly, but for this, really what we're giving you is just kind of a flavor of the different types or ways to get an actual, to move from a non-immigrant visa to an immigrant visa. And then for the details, like in terms of the individual green card areas, we have, as I said, separate webinars where we talk about them in a fair amount of detail. But this is, as I said, just to give you a flavor of the different, and just to recap them. It might be family based. So it could be that you have a family member in the US, usually a US citizen or a minimum a green card holder that's able to sponsor you. And we're going to be looking at whether or not the category is current. But then if you're under the employment based side, you're going to be looking at EB1 through EB5. And as I said, we didn't talk about EB4, but just touched on the categories for the other employment based categories. So that is it, and I'm taking a look, and I know it's a lot of information. I don't see any questions here. So as I said, we will send you a copy of this presentation. We will send you some guides, and we will send you this this webinar, so you'll be able to look at it and listen to it again. And yeah, and definitely the other thing we'll send you is a link, a consult link, so you can set up a consultation with us at your convenience. Thank you very much. Take care.